Have you ever pitched a brilliant idea, gotten like a room full of enthusiastic nods, and then watched the project absolutely die the second people left the room?
Yeah, that happens constantly.
It really does. Today, we are dissecting the exact structural logic of how human systems and organizational politics actually function. We are looking at the operational mechanics of how you get things done when you have, exactly zero managerial authority to tell people what to do.
Right. The connecting thread through all of this is protecting your operational bandwidth and forcing reality to bend to your agenda rather than just getting swallowed by the corporate machine.
Exactly. So let us start with that scenario you have absolutely lived through, the failed pitch. You pitch a new workflow initiative, and the pitch lands perfectly.
Someone explicitly states the idea sounds great.
And you leave the room expecting momentum,
Right.
and you get absolutely nothing. Zero follow-through.
The structural problem here is, well, a reliance on abstract benefits when you are operating without structural authority. I mean, landing a pitch and actually generating movement are entirely separate mechanical processes.
Right, because when you do not have the power to mandate participation, your pitch is entirely responsible for doing the heavy lifting.
Exactly. Pitching a concept like team cohesion or synergy as the primary benefit is structurally useless. Team cohesion does not solve the immediate granular operational burdens sitting on your colleague's desk right this second.
Okay, let's unpack this. Pitching an abstract benefit to an overworked colleague is, it is the equivalent of offering a drowning person a lecture on water safety instead of throwing them a life raft.
That is exactly what it is.
Imagine standing on the dock with a whiteboard, drawing diagrams about proper swimming techniques while the person is actively swallowing water. The water safety lecture is objectively true. It is helpful in a general macroscopic sense.
But it completely ignores the immediate, terrifying crisis of staying afloat.
Right. The drowning person cannot process your whiteboard diagram because their entire cognitive load is dedicated to survival. Your overworked colleague is drowning in unread emails, overlapping deadlines, and competing demands. They literally cannot care about team cohesion.
Because people only commit to movement when the ask connects directly to a cost they are already paying. The team cohesion argument fails because it applies to everyone in general, which makes it compelling to absolutely no one in particular.
So how do we actually fix the pitch?
To generate movement, you must completely discard the abstract pitch and replace it with a granular operational tactic. You take the exact same project, the exact same workflow initiative, but you reframe the pitch from the ground up.
So instead of selling harmony, you present the project as a precise mechanism to reduce duplicated work caused by a lack of cross-departmental visibility.
Yes, that immediately shifts the entire dynamic of the conversation.
Because repeated work is a daily friction point. Spending 3 hours building a report only to find out another department built the exact same report yesterday is a tangible, infuriating frustration.
You are no longer asking for a favor for the good of the organization. You are proposing a highly specific trade. You are identifying a quantifiable pain point your colleague experiences daily, and you are offering to eliminate it in exchange for their participation.
The ask itself remains identical. The work you need them to do has not changed at all.
But the angle of the pitch is what changes. You must aim the solution directly at the cost the other person is currently absorbing. A mandate forces participation regardless of personal friction. But without a mandate, that personal friction must become the primary target of your solution.
If the pitch does not solve an immediate problem for the person sitting across from you, the framing is entirely irrelevant. You can reword an abstract pitch a dozen different ways, put it on a glossy slide deck, and the result will always be polite agreement followed by total inaction.
Exactly. Fixing this pitch, identifying the individual cost, and offering the trade is the foundational step.
But successfully aligning these incentives frequently leads professionals straight into another deeply entrenched organizational trap. You get everyone on board, and you immediately walk into the endless looping planning meeting.
Oh, we have all lost weeks of our lives to this specific meeting. A project gets trapped in the discussion phase for 3 consecutive weeks. The exact same group of people convenes to debate the exact same list of concerns.
A hypothetical risk is raised today that was extensively debated last Tuesday.
And the conversation loops endlessly, and the actual operational movement remains at absolute zero.
The structural logic governing these looping meetings is the total absence of ground truth. When a project exists purely as a hypothetical concept on a whiteboard, every single opinion, fear, and catastrophic projection carries identical weight.
Right, you can argue indefinitely about user adoption, potential failure points, and implementation hurdles because there is no physical reality in the room to test those arguments against.
A junior employee's hypothetical fear holds the exact same conversational value as a senior engineer's strategic vision.
Which is why the operational tactic required to shatter this cycle is speed. And speed, defined in this specific context, is not rushing carelessly or working until midnight.
Right.
Speed is the operational capacity to compress focused effort into a short window to produce a rough, incomplete, real-world prototype. You must drag the concept out of the hypothetical realm and force it into the physical world as quickly as humanly possible.
Wait, hold on. I have to push back here. If I bring a prototype to my manager that I just hacked together over the weekend and it is missing half of its core features, aren't I just going to look completely incompetent? Doesn't bringing a visibly half-baked concept into a formal corporate meeting destroy my professional credibility right out of the gate?
What's fascinating here is how the introduction of a physical artifact instantly alters the power dynamics of a room. You cannot debate a prototype out of existence.
Oh, I see.
The moment a tangible working model sits on the table, the entire meeting is forced to shift from a theoretical debate to an applied problem-solving session.
Because there is actually something real to look at.
Exactly. Your colleagues will absolutely poke holes in the prototype. They will aggressively point out the missing features and the structural flaws. But they are now reacting to a real object with specific, observable problems rather than arguing over abstract, hypothetical risks.
They are no longer debating whether the idea should exist. They are inadvertently collaborating with you on how to fix the thing that already exists.
Yes. The conversation finally stops spinning in place. The relief of having a real object on the table forces everyone to stop projecting their anxieties and start using their actual skills.
The debate becomes permanently anchored to reality.
And constructing a prototype that effectively moves a conversation forward requires a precise understanding of what to cut. A successful prototype is never a comprehensive solution. It is a highly specific slice of functionality designed exclusively to force a reaction.
So one single poorly functioning feature is operationally superior to a comprehensive, beautiful, entirely theoretical slide deck.
100%. The professional who masters this compression of effort wins consistently. They force ideas into reality, while the rest of the organization is still holding recurring calendar invites about the theoretical possibility of the idea.
Making things real changes the environment, sure, but bringing a physical prototype into the light inevitably attracts the skeptics. There's always someone in the room who looks at the prototype and immediately declares that it will never scale, or that it violates some obscure historical precedent.
Always.
When a colleague actively dismisses the work you have materialized, the immediate visceral reflex is to prove them definitively wrong. We want to crush their skepticism with undeniable evidence. We fall headfirst into the trap of the moral victory.
And that trap is incredibly insidious because it perfectly masquerades as productive work. You feel a massive rush of adrenaline and righteous indignation. You tell yourself you are defending the integrity of the project.
Consider the scenario where the skeptic states your initiative cannot be executed. You know factually that it can be done. So you invest 2 full hours of your afternoon constructing an undeniable, ironclad proof of concept.
Right.
You march back to their desk, you deliver the proof, and they offer a dismissive nod. Say something non-committal like, huh, interesting, and return to their daily tasks.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
You experience a profound sense of satisfaction because you won the argument. But that satisfaction is a total trap. You just spent 2 hours building a proof strictly because someone else expressed a random doubt.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is a fundamental surrender of your operational agency. The exact moment you make the decision to prove a skeptic wrong, you have handed them the steering wheel of your schedule.
You operate under the illusion of initiative because you are the one furiously typing on the keyboard, performing the labor.
But the objective of that labor was dictated entirely by their passing apathetic comment. You are no longer executing your strategy. You are executing their skepticism.
It is the exact equivalent of taking a 2-hour detour on a major road trip simply to show a passenger a billboard they did not believe existed.
That is a perfect analogy.
You successfully win the argument. You drive them right up to the billboard and prove it is real. But you are now 2 hours late, arriving at your actual destination, burning fuel you needed for the journey. The argument was won at the direct expense of your primary objective.
The granular test to protect your agency requires asking one highly specific, ruthless question when these interactions occur. Would you spend the time executing this work if the conversation with the skeptic never took place?
And if the answer is no, the labor is purely reactive and must be abandoned immediately.
Because work that genuinely moves reality forward looks identical whether someone believed in its potential or not. A skeptic's disbelief does not alter the structural reality of the project in any way.
Someone else's doubt is not an operational variable you are required to solve. The professionals who squander the most operational bandwidth are those who possess a complete inability to let an incorrect statement exist in the world without issuing a correction.
Every expressed doubt is interpreted as a mandate to respond. The work becomes entirely reactive, dictated by the random skepticism of external parties, rather than internal strategic objectives.
The 2 hours you invested in proving a point to an apathetic colleague represent 2 hours permanently diverted from your actual goals. So what does this all mean?
Well, it means we have to rethink where our energy goes.
Right. If we are systematically ignoring the skeptics, stripping away the ego involved in proving people wrong, and protecting our time to focus entirely on materializing prototypes, we suddenly have to be incredibly picky about who we actually collaborate with.
Exactly. If we are not wasting time on the doubters, who do we spend our time on?
We need an operational framework for identifying the correct individuals to bring into the trenches with us. We need to evaluate talent based on the delta rather than the final destination. Picture a team dinner where a colleague mentions purchasing their first car. It is a sensible, heavily used sedan. Another colleague at the table smirks and labels the purchase mediocre.
Applying the label of mediocrity based solely on the final visible outcome is a fundamentally broken diagnostic tool. The colleague issuing the judgment likely grew up in a household with multiple vehicles, vast financial resources, and a safety net that prevented them from ever experiencing true scarcity.
They are completely blind to the fact that the individual who purchased the used sedan spent their childhood taking 3 separate buses to school, navigating severe financial constraints, and working multiple jobs just to achieve baseline stability.
The material outcome is the exact same used sedan. The required effort to achieve that outcome is vastly, almost incomprehensibly different.
The label of mediocrity relies entirely on reading the final destination while completely ignoring the position of the starting line. It measures the object, not the journey.
The true metric of human capability is the delta. The delta is the distance traveled between the origin point and the current reality. Consider an individual who begins life navigating immense financial stress, operating in environments where basic stability is a constant, exhausting struggle.
Right.
If that individual successfully fights their way to a stable professional role and a secure living situation, they have not settled into mediocrity. They have traversed an enormous developmental and economic distance. The delta is massive.
Contrast this with a colleague who has provided every conceivable resource, a pre-existing professional network, paid internships, and absolute financial security.
If this privileged individual arrives at the exact same professional role, they have effectively stood completely still. The destination is identical, but the exertion of effort is fundamentally disparate.
I love the idea of measuring the delta, but I am struggling to see how that actually works on a random Tuesday morning when I'm just trying to pick a team for a highly stressful project. I have 2 resumes, or 2 internal candidates, both sitting at the exact same job title. What does this evaluation look like in practice?
How do we use the delta to make strategic decisions about where to invest organizational energy?
Yes, exactly.
The delta serves as the ultimate unforgeable signal of professional reliability. An individual who has clawed their way to a baseline of normalcy possesses a historically proven floor. They have actively built the psychological and operational muscle required to grind through friction, setbacks, and systemic indifference.
They know how to suffer productively.
Yes. They simply require a compelling operational reason to continue applying that force. When a project goes completely sideways, the person with the massive delta does not panic, because culprit stress is nothing compared to the structural stress they've already conquered.
They have a resilience that cannot be taught in the seminar. It was forged in reality.
Conversely, attempting to ignite ambition or demand extreme resilience from an individual who has never been forced to traverse a difficult delta is an incredibly expensive waste of organizational energy. Comfort has always been their default setting.
When the prototype breaks and the executives are demanding answers, the individual who has effectively stood still their entire life will often shatter.
Because they have no historical reference point for navigating severe operational friction. When evaluating talent for high-stakes initiatives, investigating the starting point radically alters your interpretation of their current position. You are looking for the proven capacity to travel the distance, not just the ability to occupy the seat.
Executing at this rigorous level requires an immense continuous expenditure of energy, traversing massive deltas, forcing prototypes into reality against heavy institutional inertia, and constantly guarding your schedule against the ego traps of reactive work demands significant physiological and psychological resources.
It really does.
Humans are biological systems. We are not infinite capacity machines. Eventually, the available energy drops. You will inevitably experience what can be categorized as a lower resolution day.
Oh, absolutely.
You plan a bank holiday meticulously. The agenda dictates a rigorous morning workout, an intensive testing session for a new AI workflow tool, and the drafting of 2 comprehensive essays. You are prepared to conquer the world.
But then biological reality intervenes.
Yeah, exactly. You oversleep significantly. You wake up feeling heavy and unmotivated. You execute a highly compressed, abbreviated 20-minute workout instead of the hour you planned. You install the AI tool but completely fail to initiate the testing protocols.
You stare at a blinking cursor and generate rough, fragmented drafts of the essays instead of the polished copy you envisioned.
And immediately upon the conclusion of the day, an internal voice surfaces to categorize you as a complete failure for squandering the available time. Here's where it gets really interesting. That internal categorization is a complete structural misinterpretation of the data.
That voice in your head is just a really bad accountant. It operates on a simplistic, binary logic that completely ignores the concept of invisible costs.
The internal voice assesses the available 16 waking hours, notes that the completed tasks only required perhaps 4 hours of active, focused execution, and aggressively demands an accounting for the missing 12 hours.
It calls you lazy. It calls you undisciplined. This accounting entirely ignores the biological reality of recovery. It ignores the heavy cognitive load of anticipating upcoming professional conflicts.
It ignores the physiological reality of operating with a depleted energy reserve after weeks of high-level execution. The voice expects machine-level consistency from a biological organism. It views any deviation from maximum output as a moral failing rather than a physiological inevitability.
But the structural reality of that lower resolution day is entirely different from what the critic claims. Look at the actual facts of the timeline. Every single task on the agenda was still addressed.
Right. The workout occurred even if it was abbreviated.
The essays were drafted, even if they're rough. The software was installed, even if it is not mastered. You did not advance your position aggressively, but crucially, you did not surrender any ground.
You maintain the structural integrity of your routine despite operating under degraded conditions. You held the baseline. When the energy was completely gone, your floor was still high enough to keep the systems running.
Holding the baseline during a severe energy fluctuation is a massive demonstration of structural integrity. The internal critic interprets a fluctuation in output as a systemic, catastrophic failure.
But the correct interpretation is that your operational floor is significantly higher than the internal critic is willing to acknowledge.
Exactly. You completed the baseline requirements despite the heavy presence of invisible, unquantified costs. The actionable requirement here is to fundamentally alter your relationship with this internal voice. You must stop negotiating with it as if it holds absolute moral authority over your output.
We treat that internal critic like it is an omniscient judge handing down a verdict on our character. But the critic is not an authoritative judge at all.
The critic is merely a faulty data collection mechanism that only ever arrives after the work is already complete. It never helps you lift the weight, it just critiques your form after you put it down.
So what do we do with it?
The only piece of actionable intelligence the internal critic provides is a more precise calibration of how long tasks actually take to execute when you are operating under degraded conditions. It provides raw mathematical data for future scheduling.
It tells you that drafting 2 essays on low sleep takes 4 hours instead of 2.
Right. Every other commentary it provides regarding failure, slipping standards, or wasted potential is simply physiological noise masquerading as professional accountability. The facts dictate that the baseline was held. Negotiating with a critical voice that only appears after the effort has been expended is a further waste of your operational bandwidth.
Extract the scheduling data, update your calendar, and completely discard the moral judgment. If your colleague's disbelief isn't a problem you need to solve, and your own internal critic is just a faulty data collector spitting out bad math, whose voice are you actually working for right now? Take a hard look at your agenda tomorrow morning and make sure it is yours.